Hi, I'm Nino Gonzalez, and welcome to another episode of Making Sense. Well, today I'm going to talk about several topics, and one of them is surprising ways that you as an individual can ruin your credit score. So let's go through some of these things that you might have thought of, or they might be new to you, but let's go through them. The first thing is car rental reservations. So usually when we rent a car, we use a credit card to secure the rental and to pay for it, and that's the best way because a lot of credit card companies, they also offer insurance coverage that you might not have to purchase from the rental car company. But sometimes people use their debit card to rent a car. And what happens is that a lot of the rental car companies, when you use a debit card, they will run a credit inquiry on you to check your credit. And that surprises a lot of people, and that is a hard look into your credit report, and that could affect your credit score. So one of the suggestions that I suggest is when you rent a car, do not use a debit card, use a credit card, and it also offers you that extra insurance and protection on the car if your card offers that, and you don't have to buy that extra insurance from the rental car company. Another thing that surprises a lot of people is past rental payments, especially if you're renting an apartment or renting a house. Sometimes when you're going to rent, they will check your credit. But as you're renting and you might fall behind on your rental payments, that landlord or the apartment rental company or the property management company could report your past due rent payments on your credit report, especially if it gets really past due. So one of the things, if you think you're going to be late, make sure you talk to the property manager, let them know, maybe work some arrangements, and not try to get into the habit of falling behind on those rental payments, and making sure that you can afford where you're going to live, so you won't be stuck in that situation. But a lot of, especially the national companies that rent out apartments, they could report those past due rental payments on your credit report, which then has a negative impact on your credit score. Another little thing that some people are not aware of are library delinquencies. So if we checked out that DVD or we checked out some books and we're past due, a lot of libraries might charge you maybe 25 cents per day, and after a certain amount, they might tack on an additional fee. But sometimes if these go uncollected, they turn them over to a collection agency, and sometimes that collection agency will report those past due amounts on your credit report, and that negatively affects your credit score. So the best thing is to try and return those items on time. If you owe any past due library fees, pay it up. If you lost the DVD or lost the book, then fess up to it and pay for the replacement. But a lot of people aren't aware that these library delinquencies could lead up showing in your credit report. And usually there's maybe amnesty weeks that libraries give, and especially sometimes during the holidays, like if you bring in a new toy or some canned food, they'll waive some of those penalties and delinquencies, and maybe even forgive them off your record. So just be on the lookout for that, and make sure that if you check out any books or DVDs from the library, that you return them on time. Well, one of the things that really gets individuals into a bad credit situation is outstanding medical bills. And if you've been in a situation where you've had health issues, or you've had family members who have had health issues and they rack up medical bills, and you know that just a visit to a hospital or an emergency room, that's going to cost quite a bit. And sometimes the insurance will not cover everything. So we got to make sure that we are in the network that our insurance is covering, and we're going to the hospital that the insurance approves. But you might also have out-of-network providers as these specialists or other service providers start seeing you. So making sure that all of those are within your network, because the insurance might not cover everything. So one of the things that we got to be aware of is when we receive that bill is that we go through it, because there has been a lot of instances where we are being overcharged, we are being there's duplicate charges, or we are being charged for services that we never received. So what happens is that now what what one of the trade commissions did is they have asked that past due medical bills be accounted for in a different way, because they happen due to an unforeseen circumstance, such as maybe getting into other types of credit debt problem. So FICO has taken that into consideration, but it also depends how the lenders look at those. And you could make a statement on your credit report showing why you were past due, especially if there were medical bills. But one of the things to do is to make sure that if you have an outstanding balance, make sure you contact the medical provider, whether it's a hospital or a doctor or an anesthesiologist, and make payment arrangements, because as long as you're paying on a monthly basis and you're paying on a timely basis, that will not appear on your credit report. So make sure you take care of that, because those tend to go into collection fairly quickly. Another thing is if you need help, there could be also places where you can go to get some help regarding medical bills. But one of the things that I suggest is maybe negotiating. Maybe negotiate your outstanding balance with a hospital, because remember, when hospitals contract with insurance companies, they're paying a lesser amount than I would go and pay if I didn't have any insurance. So there's room to wiggle there for a lesser amount. So make sure you always take care of those outstanding medical bills. Another thing is delinquent tax obligations. Now, if you're getting a bill from the IRS or the local tax collector and they keep sending you notices and you just ignore them, the best thing is, again, set up payment arrangements with that agency, because if you don't, it could lead to collection. And once it gets into a collection agency's hand, then they could report that amount to the credit bureaus, and of course that will also affect your credit score. So making sure that we take care of any of those tax delinquencies that we have, and especially, for example, let's say property taxes. If those property taxes go unpaid and then they go into a collection agency, and especially if it goes into legal proceedings, those will appear on your credit report, not just as a ding on payment activity, but also as public records, because the city could sue you for those taxes that you owe. So it's real important that we keep up on any type of tax liability that we might have. Another thing is recurring bills. What do I mean by this? Cable company, utility companies, cable TV providers, satellite companies, all those bills that we pay on a monthly basis. And of course, if you don't pay them, they might send you a notice. Then they might send you a notice that they're going to cut off your service. But after a while, if you start ignoring those and they go unpaid, they have the right to report those amounts to the credit bureaus. And of course, those are some things that we might not be aware of. So making sure that we always keep up on time on those recurring bills. Another thing is, we're in the new year and a lot of people get gym memberships. Well, let's make sure we read the contract and we read the fine print on those gym memberships, because if we don't, then, and if we don't properly close the account and terminate it and follow the agreement that we signed, it could be good for a year, but then if you don't cancel it, it renews, and if you stop payment, they could again turn that into a collection agency, and again it could damage your credit and your credit score. So it's important that if we stop going to the gym and we no longer need that service, that we make sure we notify the appropriate people that handle that, so making sure that account is closed after you fulfill that obligation. Because a lot of times you have to be signed up for a year, maybe 6 months, maybe it's on a month-to-month basis, but usually if it's a yearly contract, then if you do cancel it early, you could be subject to some penalty fees according to whatever the agreement might say. Unpaid traffic citations. Well, of course, if we have any types of trouble with law enforcement regarding unpaid speeding or traffic bills or anything like that, of course they're going to be turned over to a collection agency. But not only that, they could issue a warrant for your arrest. But let's think about other things. What if maybe it was parking tickets, or maybe it was at the college or a university where you might have parked where you shouldn't have, or you don't have the appropriate sticker, and they charge you and you ignore those. Well, a lot of those will put a hold on your records until those are paid up. But if you don't go back, they could turn that over again into collections, and they could report it to the credit bureau. So making sure that we're caught up in anything that we owe, whether it's parking citations, whether it's moving violation citations, anything like that, because those can be serious matter and can also lead to a warrant for your arrest. So making sure that we keep those paid up and we're responsible for what we did wrong. Closing credit cards. Well, I've talked about this in a show before, in several shows before, is that your credit score is determined by how much credit you have and how much credit you use. So if I close an account that has, let's say, a $10,000 credit limit, well, that $10,000 is going to go away, and then that's going to work against me if I owe money and raise my credit utilization ratio, which then affects my score. Not only that, the length of the accounts is also factored in your credit report and your credit score. So the longer you have an account that's open and you're using it periodically and you're paying it off and you're on time, that's favorable for you. So you don't want to just close credit cards to close them, making sure that, hey, how long have I had them? How much is the credit limit? Because if I close this account and I don't owe anything, that's $10,000 worth of credit that's going to disappear. And if I owe $15,000 right now, well, that $10,000 is going to go away. And so what is that going to do to your debt ratio? It's going to make it go up, which is going to bring your credit score down. So these are some of the things that we don't think about that could impact our credit scores. And we'll continue with more of these things. And also what to do if you have some unpaid medical bills on the second half of Making Sense. Welcome to the second half of Making Sense. And in the first half, we were talking about maybe some surprising ways that we might do that could affect negatively your credit score. Some you might be aware of, some you might not. But let's go through some more of these things that could negatively affect your credit score. And I've talked about this many times, is too many credit card applications. So that means we open several credit card applications or loans within a short period of time. That definitely is going to ruin your credit and your FICO score. So it's important that we take a look and open up only accounts that we need. For example, let's say we go to a department store and they tell you, oh, well, if you open a credit card with us today, you can take 20 or 25% off your purchase. Well, when you do that, they're going to run a hard credit inquiry on your report, and that's going to affect your score. Is it worth that 20 to 25% that you're going to be saving, which could also bring down your credit score, which then could affect other things? So it's real important when we're taking out credit that we don't just look at the discounts or the products that they're giving us, but ask yourself, do I really need another account? Do I really need to take this extra credit? And if you can't afford it, well, maybe you shouldn't buy it. Another thing is inadequate credit mix. Uh, your FICO score is determined by what type of credit you have. If most of your credit is through credit cards, that is going to have a negative impact on your credit score. They want to see a good mixture, such as maybe car loans, maybe personal loans, maybe a mortgage, and then some credit card debt. So it all depends what type of mix you have. So if all of my credit is through credit cards and I don't have any other type of installment loans, that could have a negative effect on my credit score. So it's important to have a good mixture if we're going to have credit. And one of the other things that we have is in-house zero interest financing. Well, sometimes you might go to a mattress store, you might go to a place and you need tires for your vehicle, and they offer you 6 months no interest, but they offer their own financing. Well, what happens is that, yes, you're going to get 6 months no interest, but if you open up an account with them, not only that, that is a credit inquiry. So because you are opening a new account in order to get that promotion of 0% interest for 6 or 12 months. So it's real important that, again, do I need to open up that account in order to save that interest? Or should maybe I should pay a different way, or maybe save up for the money that I need? Sometimes I know that things come up that we don't expect it, but that's the whole purpose of trying to have that emergency fund that I've talked to you about so many times, at least trying to save up $1,000, $2,000, so when those life problems come up, hopefully we don't have to open up these type of accounts. Another word of caution with these zero interest financing, they do sometimes require a minimum payment, so you do have to pay a minimum, and if you don't pay it off within 6 months, that interest is going to accrue from the time of purchase. So when the 6 months runs up and you still owe money, well, what's going to happen is they're going to calculate the interest on the original amount, not on what you owe. And it could be several $100s that you might have accrued on interest, because a lot of these credit cards carry maybe about 18, 21, maybe up to 30% interest. So we got to be careful that if we do get that zero interest, and that we are able to pay it off within those 6 months, so we don't get back charged all the interest from the time of the purchase. So make sure you take a look at the agreement. Make sure you ask yourself, do I really need this? And if you do get it, can you pay it off within the 6 or 12 months to get that promotion? And I know that sometimes they might even go to 18 or 24 months. So can you afford to pay it off within that time and to save that interest? So that way you're not faced in that situation at the end and you go, oops, I didn't know about that, but it's all in the agreement. So be careful about those 0% financing agreements. So what happens if you have medical bills? As I talked about, many of us could have unexpected medical expenses, and that was one of the things that puts people into debt. That's one of the things that ruins people's credit. Another thing is, of course, an unexpected loss of a job. But let's talk about medical bills. And Experian, one of the credit bureaus, says that more than 64 million Americans have a medical bill in collections of their credit report. That's quite a bit. And according to the Wall Street Journal, more than half of all debt collection activity on a consumer's credit report comes from medical bills. So if something is going to negatively impact of all of these that I talked about, it's going to be unpaid medical expenses. So don't ignore them. So the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has called on the credit scoring companies and credit bureaus to weigh these less than other types of debt because they were unexpected, not because of our reckless behavior of not using credit wisely. So since then, FICO, which is one of the major credit scoring companies, has reduced the weight that they place on unpaid medical expenses. But again, it's up to whoever you're borrowing money from or obtaining credit for them to take that into consideration. We might see a little bit more widespread use of that, but it's fairly new. So they are being weighed a little bit differently because of the circumstances that it happens. Once again, let's examine that itemized bill that we get from the hospital or from the provider. And if you don't, request it. And also get your explanation of benefits from the insurance company and compare them. And compare, making sure that what you're responsible for is what the provider says you're responsible for according to the insurance. Because usually what happens is that providers such as hospitals, doctors, urgent care clinics, they have agreements with insurance companies. And that's if they're within their network for discounted rates. So making sure that they offer you those rates that are provided in your explanation of benefits. And once again, as I mentioned in the first half, going through it line by line, making sure, did I get that drug? Did I get that service? Or why am I being billed twice for that? Ask. And if there's a discrepancy in there, making sure that we call the provider. According to the Medical Billing Advocate of America, 8 in 10 hospital bills contain errors. So make sure that we go through that on a line-by-line basis. So common errors include, once again, charges for medications you never received, or they double charge you for those medication or services that were never rendered. So making sure that we take a look at that hospital bill, and you might be surprised, hey, they never gave me that aspirin that they're charging me so much for, or I don't remember getting so much of that medication. So making sure that we go through that on a line-by-line basis. If you can't afford to pay the bill, as I mentioned in the first half, try and negotiate with a provider, because whatever balance is due, that's your responsibility. And if you didn't have insurance when you incurred that bill, well, as I mentioned, usually if you don't have insurance, your bill is going to be higher than if you do have insurance because of the discounted rates. So there's room in there to negotiate for a lower amount, especially if you don't have insurance. A lot of hospitals have charity care programs that cover the bills of low-income patients. So make sure that you take advantage of all of that. And if you do and you agree with that amount or you negotiate amount, set up a payment plan and make sure you're timely on a monthly basis, because as long as you're making payments on a monthly basis with what you negotiated with a provider or you agreed to pay, that will not have a negative impact on your credit report or your credit score. You can also visit benefits.gov to learn more about federal programs that may qualify you for government assistance with help for medical bills if you really need that. And there's a lot of nonprofit organizations that will also help you with medical bills, and drug companies, especially with name brand drugs. If you're a certain income level, they could reduce the amount that you get that medicine for maybe a $10 or a $20 copay. Most of your major drug companies have that in place for people that can't afford those name brand prescriptions. So now let's turn our focus into emotions and credit. And one of the things that surprises me is that our buying habits are affected by our emotions. So it was interesting. I saw a survey on nerdwallet.com, and they surveyed more than 2,000 adults. And 64% of Americans have credit card debt or had it in the past. And about half of the Americans, about 49%, say their emotions have caused them to spend more than what they can reasonably afford. So we got to be careful when we go out shopping that our emotions are in check. It's just like I don't want to go to a grocery store and go grocery shopping when I'm hungry. Yeah, you've heard that, because you'll wind up buying everything in the store because everything, seems yummy at the time. So making sure that we go and do our shopping after we've eaten. But let's think about younger Americans. This is more true about younger Americans. They found that 67% of millennials say emotions have caused them to overspend, while those that are 65 and older, it only accounts for 29%. And that makes a little bit more sense because I'm hoping that with age comes more maturity and more common sense, and hopefully we have our emotions more in check. But let's take a look at some of these statistics. So stress created about 29% of unexpected purchases. Excitement created about 22% of unexpected purchases. And sadness caused about 13%. Now, women are more likely to blame stress on overspending or spending things that they don't need and getting into credit card debt, while men blame more the excitement. So it's interesting to see how what drives women to spend a little bit more and make foolish decisions, and what drives men to make those foolish decisions and usually it's excitement. So another thing that we took a look with this that came about, another emotion was embarrassment. And when we're talking about embarrassment, about 68% said that they are acceptable reasons for credit card debt. But another 67%, almost the same percentage, they're embarrassed that they're in debt, and we don't talk about it. Because there's a lot of individuals that might seem everything is okay, but when we really take a look at their finance, they have a lot of debt. And they might be embarrassed to come clean about that. And some of these can also be due to addictions. So we got to make sure that we keep our emotions in check and make sure that if we have any type of addictions, we take care of that, because that could lead to overspending and that could lead to credit problems. Well, I hope this information proved useful. I gave you some surprising ways that you might or might not have heard that could wreck your credit score. We talked about maybe what to do if you have outstanding medical expenses, so we can take care of that. And we also ended the show talking about emotions and credit. Well, I hope you find this information useful, and if you have any topics, any suggestions about the show, please feel free to email me, and we'll see you next week on another episode of Making Sense. Goodbye.